and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Weiler, I wanted to thank you for your testimony and follow up a little bit on the realities of managing a small to medium-sized airport. As a manager of a small airport, I would expect, and your testimony certainly suggested, that you struggle with some of the same security and funding challenges that other such airports do, like the one in my city of Manchester, New Hampshire. As you know, the President's budget request eliminates the TSA grants to reimburse state and local law enforcement for their patrols of airports in the surrounding areas, and it also dramatically cuts Viper teams. When the budget came out earlier this year, I asked then Secretary of DHS Kelly during a Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing about why the administration cut these programs, even though our aviation system is facing increased threats. Secretary Kelly's response to my question was that from DHS's perspective, the state and local law enforcement would have to shoulder more of the burden for securing the airport and its surrounding areas, given that airports generate so much revenue for states and municipalities. I reminded him at the time that at least in my state of New Hampshire, budgets are pretty slim and local property taxpayers aren't eager to increase their property tax rates anymore. So I understand from your testimony that your airport runs on an enterprise fund and has its own 10 uniformed police officers patrolling the airport. How much does maintaining that force cost? And additionally, does that police force, would that be able to stay up and running if your local enforcement grants are cut?
Senator, it's a constant challenge. We cover a large geographic area. Our airport's 3,300 acres. We do rely heavily, as do the other 300 airports, on this law enforcement officer program. Airports may be seen as a cash cow, but honestly, it's probably more in terms of the economic impact that they generate. They don't really generate money for the local entities. So the bill does call for increase in security in public areas, baggage around ticket checkpoints, things like that, which we all agree are good. But at least the draft bill from this committee also increases the funding for the LEO to provide those resources, especially small airports. There's only so many places I can go, and the airlines that operate there that our communities rely heavily on, in a lot of cases I have no choice but to pass those fees along to them. And to them, it may actually be the point of losing a route or gaining an additional frequency. So it's a focus on us, a constant challenge to maintain that balance. We all want good security, but there's only so much money in the bank for us.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And then a question to both you and Mr. White. In the past, this subcommittee has focused on insider threats at airports and increasing the capacity of TSA to screen airport workers. However, one potentially overlooked area of insider threat vetting is the security and authenticity of pilots' licenses. According to a recent Boston Globe investigation, the Federal Aviation Administration has issued pilots' licenses and credentials to applicants without having fully vetted the pilot first. And the investigation found that at least 5 pilots with active licenses matched watch list records for their connection to terrorism or international crime. So obviously this is a really startling report and discovery. The lapse appears to stem from insufficient communication between FAA and TSA, as well as the FAA's inability to validate the authenticity of personal information on pilots' licenses at the time of the application. So to both you, Mr. White and Mr. Weiler, your constituencies rely heavily on the trustworthiness and reliability of pilots, obviously. Would you support holding pilots at a minimum to the same security standards as we do airport workers? Mr. White, why don't you start?
I think it's something that would be looked at, but from the commercial airlines license, if we're looking at commercial pilots, I think the scrutiny goes beyond just what the governments themselves do as to what the companies and the airlines also are looking at. From an international perspective, we're looking at from multiple purposes of securing the individuals that are flying those aircraft with local governments where they're based and with the U.S. government. Right. So there's a multiple look at that. I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that study, but it's something I can go back and find more information on.
Right. We'll be happy to get you a copy of the report. It's relatively recent. It was very concerning to me. That's why I'm bringing it up. Mr. Weiler.
I can't speak to that specific issue as well, but I do know known threat and possibly even 100% screening has been used effectively at some airports. I will tell you it does have airports our size, very concerned. Again, it's a resource issue. We have focused working with TSA on more of a random approach, limiting the number of access points for employees, doing random screening, and leaving that expectation with any airport employee that they could be screened at any time. We focused on that, and we think it's a good balance.
Well, I thank you, and I see that I'm out of time. I will add my voice to the chorus concerning Viper teams and dogs and enhancing TSA PreCheck. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.